So back in October, we released a discussion paper called Decarbonising Infrastructure Delivery, and I believe several people on this call will be familiar with that. We held an industry forum afterwards and followed that up with a series of roundtables with industry, all the way from the materials sector through to people who actually build and construct infrastructure and the peak bodies. We had quite a bit of feedback from those roundtables, but the wonderful thing was that everyone was very consistent on what they wanted. They wanted a consistent way of measuring embodied emissions for all infrastructure in New South Wales. So they wanted New South Wales government to just get agreement on something to go forward with. The message was, we don't care if it's not perfect, just pick something and go with it so we can get some consistency. And the other message was that came out loud and clear was, give us a very clear policy mandate here and don't flip-flop. And so we heard you, industry, and we are trying to do exactly that. So these are our work streams coming out of that work. The first is a regulatory measure that we're developing with the Environment Protection Authority, and this is to go into the planning policy. It's called a Protection of Environment Policy, and it will require project proponents to report on their embodied emissions and to maximise their use of recycled materials when it's appropriate to do this. We have already announced the intention to develop this policy in a formal way. It's in the Government Gazette. It went out just before caretaker mode with the change of government, and work is progressing on that. The second work stream is we are developing a whole of government policy on infrastructure and how infrastructure needs to be managing carbon emissions. So think of it as a carbon management policy for all New South Wales government infrastructure. It will set the clear mandate industry asked us for and provide guidance to agencies on how to consider embodied emissions as they develop their projects. It will be very much aligned with PAS 2080, but in a much more of a layperson's way and very much aligned to the New South Wales government and decision-making process to guide agencies. The third work stream is around measurement, and this one is huge. We are trying to align the existing approaches to measuring embodied emissions in New South Wales government to have a whole of government approach to this. We are focused on doing this in New South Wales, but we are speaking to our counterparts around the country and trying to have this adopted nationally so we can say we've got an Australian approach to doing this. That is a work in progress, but so far so good. There is a lot of enthusiasm for it. No one's really pushing back. People are very open to the idea. So we will continue to pursue that. So thanks, Monica. Some of the recent developments we've had were the announcement of that joint work with the EPA that you've seen come out recently. We worked with Treasury as part of their update to the cost-benefit analysis guidelines and made sure that measurement of embodied emissions as part of the costs part of that was in there. So now the new cost-benefit analysis guidelines require measurement of embodied emissions, which is a big step forward. Hopefully that'll set incentives for people to really consider their embodied emissions as they develop options for their projects. And we work very closely with our colleagues in transport who are doing a lot of great work in this space, as I'm sure you're all aware. And so we put out an integrated roadmap of our milestones to give people some clarity on how we're working together, how our work fits together, and just to give people a little bit of, you know, a bit more insight into where it's all going. So what are our next steps? As I mentioned with the PEP, the Protection of Environment Policy, the EPA regulatory measure, on the PEP, we're working on a discussion paper that's to be published in the coming month, and we're going to follow that up with targeted government and industry engagement. After that phase, we'll go and tidy up the back end of things and come back with a formal 3-month consultation process, which we expect will kick off around July. So many of you will hear from us again as part of that targeted engagement process. But if you don't hear from us then, you will definitely hear from us in July when we go through the big public engagement process. On the policy, so that's that whole of government policy that's PAS 2080 aligned. We're continuing to work on that internally, and we're drawing on examples from the UK in particular. We're not reinventing the wheel. And we expect that we'll have a draft out for public consultation around August-ish. On measurement, we've completed a first phase of discovery work, which involved getting into the back ends of Transport's CERT tool and looking at all the assumptions that underpin that. And we've also been going through NABERS' principles and their technical documents and looking at how that sits alongside the transport assumptions. So we've identified areas for alignment between these two things, and these are things like scope of measurement, emissions factors, and so on. And so we're about to kick off our next phase of work, which is to come up with those parameters that are consistent between the two approaches. We're working very closely with Transport and NABERS. They're very much on board with this. Everyone wants to see consistency as part of this. So as well as the parameters, we'll put out a technical paper on measurement. So people who do hold existing tools will have the opportunity to align with the New South Wales government approach once that's been finalised. And as I mentioned, through all of this, we are engaging with colleagues from other jurisdictions. We have a working group where we meet with the other jurisdictions every 6 weeks, and we progress various initiatives through that. We make sure that we're aligned. And what we're doing at the moment is the different jurisdictions are focusing efforts on different things. So rather than overlapping, we're taking different pieces of the work away, coming back and trying to see where we can just align and borrow each other's work, both to speed things up, but also to make things easier for industry, not having weird and wonderful approaches to the same thing around the country. I've tried to keep my slides very short to leave time for questions. So that's all I have today, but I'm very happy to get into detail on any of that if you would like to hear more.